You're in for a treat. Oh, we've rescheduled. There's a wonderful story, and we've heard some wonderful stories. You heard Nancy's story about she ready to make out her will, and you heard Pat and Charlie's. Charlie woke up singing in another language in bed. Former Baptist. It doesn't get any worse. Hi, Stephen. And Muriel, she couldn't be here, We saw the transformation in Muriel, and there's others. And well, we still have some more stories. Now, we're going to, tonight, I'll be doing some teaching. Next Thursday, I'll be doing some teaching. And then we're going to minister. The last two sessions, session 8 and 9, I'm not going to talk. We're going to come, and we're just going to follow the Lord. They did that in the Book of Mormon. It was really an open meeting as the Spirit led. We're going to practice. We're going to practice. So it'll be fun to hear your stories and your testimonies. But get ready. There's a wonderful story. There's a woman, I'm not going to steal her thunder. She's sitting in this room. And she ended up, I'm going to let her tell her story, but she ended up in the hospital, St. Mary's. They couldn't find out what was wrong with her. They transferred her to Center Point. They had better equipment. It's a newer hospital, They couldn't find out what was wrong with her. So they put her in a nursing home. She stayed there a few months, absolutely paralyzed. Could not move a finger. Could not move her arms. Could not even lift her head up off the pillow. Totally helpless. And the Lord spoke to me about her one day. And he said, I want you to go pray for her. So I got in my car. And the Lord said, I'm going to touch her. And on the way, I was driving down by Royal Stadium. Go Royals. Right there. And the Lord said, she's going to be healthier than she's ever been in her life. Lord touched her. She's here tonight. Not a thing in the world wrong with her. She's no longer paralyzed. You're going to hear her story. This is fun. Don't you love to watch the Lord work? We're going to talk about that tonight. I want to talk about the Lord doing the work of the Father. What is the gospel of the kingdom? I want to talk about that. And so, if we just tell people, sometimes words are not enough. Thank God for words. But sometimes people just don't listen. I had a group of Hell's Angels. Now, I don't want to steal my own thunder. I'm going to tell you this in a minute. But this is a tease. I was right in the middle of a sermon once. A group of Hell's Angels came busting in my meeting. And they come to reach for me and to make a spectacle out of me, grab me out of the pulpit. The Lord just collapsed them. They're not believers. Most Hell's Angels don't love Jesus. Okay? They reached for me. I was up on a stage like this. Now, I'm going to tell this again, but I love to watch God work. I was behind the pulpit like this, and they come right up here, 2 of them, dressed in their black leather uniform. They reached for me, and they just buckled. Their knees just buckled. I'll tell you the rest of that in a minute. That's the gospel of the kingdom. Let's talk about that. Can we jump in? It's good to see you, Stephen. And by the way, thank you all for coming. Thank you so much. Yeah. I'm enjoying this. I'm bragging on the Lord. What I would like to do to kick this thing off, and then Larry's going to come up and share his story. What I would like to do is read an excerpt, a brief quote from a new book that I'm working on. I'm really excited about this book. The title of it is Restoration Saints in the book of Revelation. So, I want to create a context of speaking about the gospel of the kingdom with that awareness. We, Restoration Saints, are in the book of Revelation, specifically chapter 4. So, a brief quote from my book, and then we'll jump in. Okay. Chapters 2 and 3. I'm talking not about my book. Chapters 2 and 3 in the book of Revelation. The Spirit of God now gives John a panoramic view of history in chapters Revelation 2 and 3. John sees the church age. He does. He sees how it plays out. I had the privilege years ago, 1968 to be exact, to visit all of these churches. I traveled to Asia. We took a trip, 3-week trip, traveled the missionaries' journeys of the Apostle Paul. And while we were going about his missionary trips, we stopped off at all of the 7 churches of Asia, or what they think was their location. Now, these 7 churches were literally there, we know, of course, but they also represent periods, I believe, within the church age. This is not in concrete. This is not, you won't find this in the D&C. This is not in the Articles of Faith. This is the Gospel according to Lynn. But I believe by studying these churches, I think I've approximated rarely closely. For example, the first church, Ephesus, represents a period approximately 2980 to 100. I believe that. Smyrna represents a time period of 100 to 300 AD. Thyatira, brief period, 350 to 500 AD, Thyatira. Sardis represents, I believe, the Dark Ages, 1,000 years, from 500 to 1,500. Philadelphia, the church at Philadelphia, I believe, represents the Reformation period from 1,500 to 1830. And the last of the churches, the church at Laodicea. By the way, they tell me the word Laodicea means the church of the people. That period represents 1830 to now, to present tense. The church at Laodicea, Jesus said an interesting thing about. He said, because you're neither cold or hot, but you're lukewarm, I'll spew you out of my mouth. Mouth in the scriptures oftentimes represents authority, warmth, testimony. And I'm making a distinction. The greatest church split in the history of the church age began, I believe, in 1830. So the Reformation period was from 1500 to 1830. Then the Reformation period essentially died. And while things got better, things got worse. Jesus didn't spew Christianity out of his mouth. He spewed what I call Christendom out of his mouth. There's no warmth, no testimony, no authority in a lot of that atmosphere. So you have church builders and kingdom builders going on at the same time, beginning at 1830. While the Reformation, you cut the head off a snake, still wiggles. Well, you cut the head off of the Reformation, it's still wiggling. But the church at Laodicea is the age of the lost and forgotten covenants. It's the post-Reformation period. It's our age in which we live. Now, in other words, and I'm quoting from my book, I'm paraphrasing and quoting. In other words, the Reformation has run its course. The church age is essentially over, and Joseph Smith was to preach the gospel of the kingdom. Enter restoration gospel after chapters 2 and 3. If you look at Revelation chapter 4, John says, I quote verses 2 and 3 in chapter 4, immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne set in heaven, and one sat on the throne, and there was a rainbow around the throne. So you have the throne of heaven surrounded by a rainbow. And John has an invitation in verse 1, come up here. Come up here. And I will show you things which must take place after this. Interesting phrase, after this. After what? After the Reformation is over. We Baptists think that's a rapture. It's really not, it's a rupture. Okay. So, the gospel that our precious Lord revealed to Joseph Smith was a gospel of the throne room. The heavens are now open. God says, I'm going to visit the earth again. Showed up in the woods. In 1821, was it? 1820, 21, 20? Yeah. The heavens were opened. Isn't it interesting that the restoration gospel is really a gospel of a rainbow? Which signifies God will make a covenant on this earth. And he did with a teenage boy. And the heavens, the gospel of the restoration is a gospel of the throne room. Really, really is. It was a gospel of the king that John saw in Revelation. We Christians in America preach really a half gospel. That's not a criticism. For the most part, we preach a half gospel. And whether we're Pentecostals or Catholics or Protestants or Book of Mormon believers, we preach a Christ on the cross, but he ain't on the cross. The gospel is really two things: Christ on the cross and Christ on the throne. And that's what was revealed to Joseph. Was hey, if God shows up in your neck of the woods in person, I can't get over this. He's there in brilliance like he was in the Revelation, book of Revelation, in brilliance, in all his splendor.